This time on Shift Points, it's going to be the last time you see the red truck for a little while. Thanks for joining. Well, at the end of last week's video, I told you guys we're going to get these brake calipers put back on and get everything hooked up and bled. And that's where I left you. I spoke too soon. When we started looking at it, we found this rubber brake line. So basically coming out from the frame rail down to the caliper is a rubber brake line. There's a fixed point up there where this goes into it, and then this is where the banjo fitting is. This is the banjo fitting, and this goes down into the brake caliper. So on Power Tour a couple times we actually had the truck bottom out, especially on those really rough South Carolina roads and bridge joints. Well, at some point this happened. This was caught between the frame rail and the axle housing apparently. So we pulled this line off. Luckily we had some other lines that were just a hair longer but the same exact style. We started to put them on and could not get that one hard line that goes into that to stop leaking. So we ended up having to pull the flare out, or we ended up pulling the line out, and right now what we're doing is working on getting that re-flared and try it again. Remember, all this stuff is stainless brake line. And stuff's just kind of hard to work with. Stainless is just a real pain to work with, and no matter what you're trying to do with it. I don't know why, but anyway, so we pulled that line out. We're going to try and re-flare both ends of it and put it back and see if we can get it going. Dad's already cut the ends of it off. I'm going to take you guys over here and show you the brake line in flare tool that we have, that we got a couple years ago, I guess now, to hopefully make this a little easier. So I'm sure most of you have seen one of these before. Handle's still in here. But this is a flare tool. Put the handle in. Flare tool, and how this works: you put the line in here, put this in there, clamp it down with that, and there's two operations depending on the size that you have. You have a operation 0 here, which when you rotate it here, it just flattens everything, gets everything to the right point where it needs to be. Then you rotate it to operation 2, so this is 3/16 line, so operation 2 for that. Then you'll do it again, press it, that'll do one flare, and then we'll go to operation 2 for the double inverted flare. And again, press that, and that should get this flare right. It's really important on stainless line not to get it hot when you're cutting it. So it's important to use like a hacksaw or something like that, because if this gets hard, or if you try and use a tubing cutter and go around it, it'll actually work harden this. It'll make it really brittle, and when you put it in that flare tool over here, it will just crack whenever you put that whenever you flare it, that line where the flare will happen, it's just going to split. So it's really important not to get that hot, and to make sure you don't work harden it when you do that, because that will also cause a leak like we were having. So we're going to keep going on this thing, get these flared, see if we can make them look a little better, because we ended up just dogging them, honestly. We had to do it when we first put it in, and we had to do it again when we were working on it this morning, and it's just it really boogered up the flares. But hopefully with this, because we didn't have this when we made these initially, hopefully with this it'll make a little bit more consistent flare. I mean, we've made hundreds and hundreds of flares with the old tool, but optimism, I guess. We're going to try and use this and go from there. Okay, so now we're going to do this. So we got the line run out. We're going to put this block on top of this, put it in, latch it, and then just kind of snug it. Don't hit it really hard, just snug it. And then we're at this operation 0. That's going to take and push the line back to where it needs to be, so that handle's all the way down. Now Dad can tighten that up. Okay. Get that good and snug. Now we're going to go to operation 1 on the 3/16. Okay. I'm going to take, again, handle all the way in. There's the first operation. Now we're going to go to operation 2 for 3/16, right there, the orange one. We're going to hit it again. And now we should have a nice flare, hopefully. How's it look? Glasses and an eye loop. It looks better than the old flare.
Looks pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
Not bad. Where's our microphone glass?
It's over there in the toolbox still. So that's how you use it. I guess we'll find out how good the flare is here in a minute when we put the line back on. But yeah, this is very handy. It's way easier, way faster than the old, like kind of the handheld, if you will, way of doing it. It's a lot. This is a lot more easier on the everything. One thing that we didn't do on the first one that we're doing now, we should have done on the first one as well, but taking a little oil and putting on that and lubricate this whole operation as you do it is really important. That one right here. That helps a lot. Keeps you from having to lay down on it as hard as I was having to lay down on it. Yeah, it had some. Yeah, like Dad said, it has some residual from where we've used it before, but always good to do that. So we're gonna flare the other side of this thing now. If we've taught you anything on this channel, sometimes things don't go to plan. That in Dad's hand is a piece of regular brake line. So I showed you guys how to properly do a flare fitting, double inverted flare, and both of them split. And then we did it 2 more times, and both of those split. Even cutting it with the hacksaw, like I said, making sure it didn't get even remotely hot, still split. So we're replacing that piece of stainless with regular brake line because those didn't split. We bent it, we got it to the shape we wanted it, and we put it together, put it in the into the flare tool. First one on both of them, perfect. No splits, no nothing. It was great. Me and Dad were talking about it, how probably if we had to do over again on this truck, we'd never use stainless in general. Like I said, it's so hard to work with. Not just brake line, stainless, the material, period, is really, really hard to work with. This truck's never going to be in the salt. It's never going to be out in the wintertime or anything like that. These regular brake lines with the coating that's on them will last forever, you know, in those conditions. So that's no problem. The other ones aren't leaking, so we're not going to mess with them. But if we ever have to change it and we run into anything like that, I think we'll just ended up slowly changing this over to a regular old brake line stuff. So we're getting that fed back in now. So something that should have took us about 20 minutes, it's been like 2.5 hours now. But that's how this stuff goes. So we're gonna get this hooked back up, hopefully get the brake lines hooked back up to the calipers and get these bled and at least have this much done. Then we'll be back at ground zero trying to get the fuel leak fixed. Okay, we got the brake lines back on. Doesn't appear to be any more leaks now that we put that regular line in. We haven't bled them yet, but we're gonna go ahead while we're back here and we're pretty filthy. We're gonna go ahead and drop the tank down here. So Dad's already working on getting that done. We've got this jack here with the rubber platform on it. So I'm gonna take it under here, jack it up. He's loosening the bolts. He's gonna leave a couple in it. All we'll have to do is drop it down. This thing should basically be empty, so there shouldn't be any fuel in it. We have been looking, and there looks to be a trail coming from the fill neck. So, but we still wanted to drop it because the zip ties we put on it in Charlotte, they're so tight I can't even get a pair of side cutters in there to cut them, to get them off. So we're still going to drop the tank, just double check everything, make sure there's not something that we're missing, and then that will be that much done. We're going to put some hose clamps on that thing, get it tightened up real good, and we should have that fixed. Alright, now that I've got you guys under here with me, you can kind of see where it's kind of trailed out from under the fill neck. It's a little hard to see, but there's a bit of a wet trail that starts there and runs in that direction there. So you can see how much it's been coming out of there. Does not appear to be anything coming out of where the fuel pump is. Doesn't appear to be anything coming out of where the sending unit is. That's aviation cement under that, so it should not be doing anything like that. But we wanted to check it. Dad is cutting us a new piece of hose. I'm gonna take and clean this off real good because it's really disgusting. Get that cleaned back up, and then we're gonna put some clamps on this, hopefully keep it from doing this anymore. I do want to put a wrench on these fittings just to be safe, but that's just me. But I think it's good. I'm gonna give bonus points to anyone that got to this point into this deal and noticed something that we didn't notice, which was that there's a vent here in the top of this fuel pump made for a plug, and we don't have it. It's not there. There's literally an open hole into the fuel tank, which is more than likely what our problem was the whole time, and we had no idea. But Dad's getting us a plug now. You see if that's what we need. Yeah. No, it's too big.
Too big?
Too big, yeah. Too big. Yeah, but yeah, I would say that was probably our issue ever since the very beginning. We've probably moved vents and everything else and didn't even really need to. But that's what you do. That's what happens sometimes. I'll tell you, this thing is there's honestly no wonder it was leaking like it was, and probably should have been leaking more, I guess. I went around this ring in the fuel pump there. All of those were pretty loose. Got all of those tightened up. Even went around the sending unit as well. And even though I know that those were tight, because I put that sending unit in brand new from Classic Instruments, and those were a little loose too. So I was able to tighten up all that. The fuel lines were tight, which I knew that those were because we had run into those leaking the first time we tried to start it, if you'll go back and watch that. So I've got those bolts around that tightened back up, screws around that tightened up, screws around the sending unit tightened up. We got a clamp on that, got another clamp on that, and we're working on fixing the vent right there. Working on that. We're gonna get a new piece of hose and everything, and then figure out how we're gonna run this up in the standard hole so it'll be mounted in there. So been a bit of a frustrating day in general, but we're trying to get it put back together. All right, we ran up to the Napa store. We got us some more 5/16 hose to run for the vent. We're just going to the Rev It Up Hot Rod Society. Aaron Riddle and his people are putting on the cruise in every second and fourth Friday of the month. They're going to do that. They're going to start tonight, this evening. They're going to start that, and we wanted to do our best to be there, especially for the first one. So we're kind of hurrying to get this thing together. We got the fuel tank put back in place up in there. You can kind of see it there. Need to clean the side of it there. So we got clamps. We tightened up all the screws on the fuel pump, tightened up all the screws on the sending unit, put 2 clamps on the fill neck. We put a new vent on it. For tonight, we're just going to run it on the outside of the standard hole like we had it, just to get us through. But we went ahead and got a new line on that, so we don't have that union in there anymore. We have to bleed the brakes, these rear brakes, and we have to put the bezel back on it so the hood will shut and latch. So those are the things that we've got to get done. Dad's went ahead and put a quart of transmission fluid in this thing, because with that monstrous transmission cooler that we put on it, it's definitely going to need some more fluid. So he already put a quart in it, and I'm very interested to see how the temperatures look on this thing. So I'm going to, when we get all this wrapped up and together, I'm going to hook the computer up as we drive up through there and see what they're doing, the transmission temperatures in particular. And we're going to be interested to see about the coolant temps, to see if that makes a difference with that too. But we got to get this stuff done. I wanted to give you a check-in, let you know what we'd got done and all the things that we did to hopefully fix the fuel leak that we had. All right, we have the brakes bled. Everything looks good, no leaks that we see at least. I'm going to hop in this thing, crank it up, and see if we have any leaks for the transmission cooler before we put the bezel back on and kind of lock everything down a little bit. You ready?
Where's the flashlight?
Over there. Yeah.
Alright, go.
That's actually under here. Let me see it. Let me see a flashlight. That one's good. The one on the, everything looks good. So no leaks that we see there. All the fittings look all right. We're gonna let this thing heat up. We'll probably, when we get it up there, we'll go ahead and check everything as far as the fluid level. Make sure that we're good on all that. So yeah, all good. So as we let this thing just kind of sit here and idle up on the jack stands, everything looks fine, no leaks or anything like that. I went ahead and hooked up the computer real quick. This maintained 75 degrees trans fluid tip for a long time. It's at 77. The coolant tip is 162 right now.
162.
So 162 on that. We're at about 77 degrees on the transmission. Dad's working on making sure that we've got enough fluid in it and everything. So he's doing that, making sure that we making sure that we put enough in it. I mean, granted, that's going to change as it gets warmer, of course, but we're just trying to kind of be precautious before we go driving it. But so far, so good on all this stuff. All right, if you guys watched the video last week, you saw us lower the fan temps a little bit. We let that thing sit up there in the garage and run for a while. It went through like 3 different cycles with the fans. They seem to be working perfectly. They're even sitting there idling. It would never get up into where the fans were like 95% on. They were just staying in that 55%, which is 117, and then they turn back off around 114. I mean, they're on for 10-15 seconds. It's not much at all. So now we're heading up to Mars Hill to check out the first cruise in up here, see how many people show up. Should be a good time. And I've got the computer hooked up as we're driving up through there. I'm going to kind of monitor the transmission temperatures and everything as we go. Right now the transmission's running at 131 and the coolant temp's at 210 as we sit, because that's, like I said, we let it sit there and run a long time in the shop. It's already coming down to 208, so it's pretty cool today. I'd say it's only like mid 70s, so this thing fan should never come on tonight, I don't think. So there's a hill on the way to Mars Hill. It's got a little bit of a climb. It's not just crazy steep, but it's it's enough. And the transmission never got above 126 that whole time. So I mean, we've knocked 80-90 degrees off of it. I mean, maybe some of the pulls that we were pulling up the mountain going to Bristol would have been a little longer and a little more sustained than that, but we weren't really getting a lot of temperature drop even whenever we were coasting down the other side of the mountain either. So this thing's at 122 right now, coolant temp 101, and we've got intake air temps about 124. So we were talking about how the air filter is probably not getting a ton of airflow where it's at because the fan shroud, the fan, everything that's there to kind of block it a little bit. It's not getting a ton of airflow, but still 124 is not too bad, I don't guess. And I also have the fuel trims here. Fuel trims are still looking pretty darn good. They could be helped in a couple areas, but in general not bad. But yeah, so it's just really cool to kind of all the information that you can get. These are the fuel trims recording up here, and 124 coming up this hill right now. So it's just really cool, everything that you can see and get by hooking this thing up to the computer. here at the Cruisin' in Mars Hill. Good group of people, good turnout for the first one, especially, and the weather was kind of spotty. Really good turnout. We got some dinner, and then we went and filled this thing up with gas. And so far, we did not see anything pouring out of it or trailing out of it. So I think, knock on wood, fingers crossed, that we have the fuel leak fixed, hopefully. Also, I don't have the computer plugged in right now, but the transmission feels like it's shifting better, which is a pretty good sign that it's that we've definitely helped it with the transmission cooler a bunch. And if the temperatures are anything like they were on the way here, they're way cooler than they were whenever we were riding around on Power Tour. Especially, I didn't even have the transmission tips pulled up at Charlotte. That would have been really interesting to see what that got to at various times during that day. But so far so good. Got the fuel leak fixed. Brakes seem to be pretty good. They seem to be kind of like settling in a little bit. Might have to go through and bleed them again one more time just to make sure we got everything good. Might do the whole system again just in case. But so far nothing leaking out of it that we've seen. So that's all good. Transmission cooler's definitely working. Yeah, that's all good news. We're really happy about that. So I feel a lot safer driving this thing now. We also, when we filled it up with gas, we did the fuel mileage, and even without terrible, that thing was leaking. We went 242 miles, and we still had, it's a 15-gallon tank. We put 13.3 gallons in it, so we still had 1.7 gallons in it. It came out to just over 18 miles a gallon. This thing should be getting some really good fuel mileage now that we have that fuel leak fixed. Now that we have the hole plugged and clamps on the fill neck and all of that stuff you saw us do, I think all of that has made a big difference, and we should see a big bump in fuel mileage in this thing. So everything went really well yesterday. All the stuff that we did seems to have really worked very well. When I got back home, whenever we got back home, Dad and Mom took the truck out and drove it a while more. Dad said it shifts better, no fuel leak, just all around improvement. So luckily everything that we did, how'd the brakes do?
They improved it.
They got better.
I'm gonna work at emergency brakes some more and get that gap cleaned up. But they're actually better. Pads got seated. They got more firm.
Gotcha.
They work good.
So when we first put them on, and that's what Dad was saying too. He said when he first put those pads on, they're gonna travel a little bit more until they kind of get seated and bedded in and everything, which makes sense. So those got better too. Now what we're doing is getting this vent fixed. So you guys saw last night and during the power tour, we had this up here in these two holes here. Well, what we've done, or what Dad did, before I even got here, you can see drilled a hole in that tab there, and he drilled one in the bottom. And basically what we're gonna do is run that hose up through this standard hole. It's plenty long enough. We're gonna bring it up to here, so we can work on it. Put the vent on it, put one of those shrink clamps on it since there's no pressure, and then that hole in there should be big enough for that plus the clamp to sit in. We're just going to pull the hose and run that down in there, and that piece of metal with the hole through it will actually be the support for the vent itself. So that will let that seat in there, let it set. It's going to be hidden, everything's going to be good. There's these 4 holes in the standard here that'll allow that to vent even with the cover on it. So that's going to be an all-around improvement to that situation too. So it won't be out here looking gaudy on the outside of the standard holes, and it's also is going to be way higher than the tank, so it'll keep it from spewing fuel out like it was on Power Tour, or well, that it potentially was. We're pretty sure it was, because you can see on the slats that Dad made under there was some like fuel residue on that. So I'm pretty sure it was pouring out of that. So, but anyway, so we're going to finish this up and get it put up in place. I'll show you guys that as we go. So what I did is I just took a piece of welding rod, run that down through there, taped it to the end of the hose, pulled it up through here. Like I said, this is plenty long enough, way longer than we need it. What we'll do is we'll just have to put it in, pull the excess, and then unplug it undo it from the vent side, and then cut that to the length that we need it. Alright, got everything tied up. So you can see down in there, that's where that's gonna live now. Got the hose tied up, so it was, oh man, that's bright. Got the hose tied up down there, got the rear end vent hose tied up also, So all that's clamped up and together, and that should be good. That should have all the stuff with the fuel tank wrapped up. So the only other big thing that we need to work on this thing at this point is to replace that return spring on the brakes, get that stronger, and then probably open up the hole around where the brake pedal comes through the floor. Open that up just a little bit to give it a little bit more clearance as it goes up through there. You guys saw it while we were on Power Tour where it had scraped the paint off the side of it and stuff. And I think that whole pedal assembly needs to be tightened up. So there's a lot of slop in it, and there's a bushing down there that has 2 nuts on it that's holding it on. So I think if we can, one with like a jam nut, I think if we tighten up the inside one, maybe take a little bit of that slop out, that will help also, and then run that jam nut down onto it. But that's the last big thing on this thing, to just get it where we're back just driving it, like I said, anytime that's not raining. And much like in some other earlier videos, apparently we moved to the Pacific Northwest because it has rained every day here in North Carolina. Alright, so we're back working on the old truck here. The last thing, kind of the last big thing that we want to do with this thing before we kind of close out this chapter a little bit and just kind of make it kind of the daily let drive it and just kind of see what happens with it, is fixing the brake pedal. So there's kind of 2 things that we think is happening. Initially we thought maybe it was we needed a stronger return spring. Maybe that's the case, but we're not going to start there. We looked at it, and if we get in here and check it out real quick, and it's hard to see probably without pressing the pedal, there's a lot of, so you can see there, that's the bolt where the pedal bolts in. You can see there's a lot of free movement in that, where that bushing is down there. So the bushing goes on the pedal, and we'll look at it more when we get under there. But I want to kind of give you guys a heads up on what we're going to do first. We're going to see if we can get that slop out of that. We think that will help keep it centered in the hole better that's coming through. So that's what scraping and kind of sticking seems to be. So when we get this thing jacked up, we're going to check that, see if we can get the slop out of that bushing, potentially take the pedal off, and right here where the pedal comes through, there's actually a little bit of it kind of flares out right there. You can see it on the sides there, kind of flares out a little bit, and we might take and trim that off a little bit and see if we can get that to open up a little. So maybe if that's what's sticking on the floor. But I think a combination of those 2 things might fix our problem, and if not, then we'll put the bigger return spring on there. But I got a hold of this pedal a little before I was able to show you guys what it looked like outside, but that's okay. You'll kind of get the gist for sure. So you can see where he's ground this down almost flat here, where this used to bulge out. Well, this is, a little exaggerated, but it kind of bulged out like this on both sides. So now it's flat. That should keep it from dragging where it comes up through the sheet metal. And I don't have my light on here. It's dead. Let me get my other one real quick. So you can see the hole there that comes up through there. So that should clean that up, keep that from rubbing against it. And we did go ahead and just pull the whole pedal assembly, check the bushings and everything that were there, make sure there wasn't anything weirdly wearing or anything like that. Everything looks good for that too. We are going to just tighten that a little tighter than what we had it. Nothing was like flopping loose or anything like that, but that was part of what that play in the whole pedal is at that bushing. So we think that big bushing right there. So we think that we can tighten up the nuts there a little bit more, get those snugged up, and if that's the case, that should take some of this out. Between the 2 of them, tightening that up, taking care of this, should allow that to do what it needs to do. Dad's also worked on the return spring some, got it to where it was kind of in more of a more stretched position, so that it's under a little bit more tension than if it's completely relaxed and has to go through it like that. So between those 3 things, I think this should be good. We're going to go ahead and get under here, bolt it back together, and check it real quick. Okay, so we're under here now. So this is the whole pedal assembly right here. And that bushing that I showed you guys earlier is right there. That bushing's on that. And that had a bunch of movement to the left and right. That we're looking toward the front of the truck, how we sat right here. And you can see we changed out this washer right here, and it was a cup washer. Here, did I turn that light off? Let me turn this one on. This was a cup washer right here. Move over here so you can see a little better maybe. Right there's a cup washer. And what we did was we changed it out with a flat washer, and that seemed to really tighten this whole assembly up and get that movement out of this. I think I've showed all this before, where this is the lever coming out of the brake booster, and then so that's attached to that. This down here is for the brake light switch, and also allows the torque converter to lock and unlock. And then this right here runs through the frame to this side. There's a bolt right there that comes through for that, and that is all mounting this together. This is all basically based, it's all fabricated and built by Dad, but it's all kind of based around the idea of the stock stuff that was in here. That brake pedal is the stock clutch pedal for this truck. So just all kind of a similar, all similar, but all fabricated to work in this configuration. And now we have all that slop out of there. Between that slop being out and that the end of that brake pedal I showed you guys earlier, this should really help this thing and keep it from doing what it was doing. And I think in all this, I haven't told you guys exactly what was going on, but basically what would happen was that would hang, and that wouldn't allow this switch here for the brake lights to make, and when it wasn't making, it wouldn't allow the torque converter to unlock. So it was causing some kind of craziness with everything. It was leaving the brake lights on and stuff like that. So that was why it was important to get this fixed. Alright, we got all that put together, showed you guys what it looked like. And I think I showed you guys kind of the slop that was in the pedal beforehand from up here. So if I turn this on now, you can see this is way more solid than it was. I mean, you think about the distance from here down to that pivot is a big lever, and so any little bit of movement down there was causing a whole bunch of movement up here. So right now that's very minimal. We did notice that when we press it, it looks like the hole's kind of getting into the top of the pedal now. So when we took the slack up, it kind of tightened it up that way, but that's okay. We're going to take the pedal back off here at some point and just open this hole up just a little bit more, give us a little more clearance. You guys aren't worried about that, so we probably won't show that, but I want to show you that, kind of see what it looks like. That seems to have even kind of firmed up the whole, like the whole pedal, Dad. Like when you press it, it feels so much more like applied now. I think there was so much slop it was kind of making you feel like it had to move even further. Alright, bring you over here to the old trusty list. We're going to fix the breaker turn off. We already fixed the fuel tank vent, fixed the fuel neck vent, fixed all the leaks back there. This is going to come eventually. Replace the brake caliper. That's a big bunch of this off. We're going to kind of go, we do need to go over some more for the nut and bolt. These two things are coming later, but that is all that we're going to have time for in this episode. We really appreciate everyone that's been watching. This truck is not going away by any means, but it's probably not going to be the subject for a little while. I think I looked on YouTube and we have nearly 30 videos, including the ones for Power Tour and everything, just about this truck alone. That's pretty crazy. I mean, we've only been doing this since the very beginning of January, right at 6 months now. And yeah, that's pretty crazy that we've put out that many about this truck. And I don't think either one of us realized it was going to take hardly as much time as it did to how to do all this, but hey, that's part of it. It's definitely not going away, but it might be a little while before you see this truck again. We're going to just try and drive this thing. We're going to massage a little bit more on that brake pedal tomorrow, but like I said, you guys aren't really interested in that. It's going to be very minor stuff. In general, this thing is really doing good, and every time we drive it, it seems like it gets a little better. So we're really happy with that. So thanks to everyone that's been watching. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook if you get a chance, and make sure to hit that subscribe button in the middle of the screen when I get done talking here. We really appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.